Those people who have not given themselves permission to be angry, people who have not developed the skill of anger inside truth, versus someone who's skilled at using anger and being able to really pinpoint and direct the anger.
Ruby Franke
and her business partner, Jodi Hildebrandt.
Together, they claim to help coach people online looking for joy in life and relationships.
This morning, a Utah mom influencer arrested.
Influencer Ruby Franke and mental health counselor Jodi Hildebrandt, both charged with 6 counts.
We wanted to do the right thing.
The internet has gone absolutely wild.
Well, you know, it's a serious video.
This is a woman who at one point had 2.5 million subscribers.
She had 2.3 million subscribers on YouTube for her parenting advice.
I grew up watching the 8 Passengers channel. I just thought they were the coolest family.
My gosh, you guys, having kids is so much fun.
I don't like my sister and I don't like what she's doing and I think she's weird.
Records show law enforcement received more than a dozen calls to 2 homes over several years.
Shh. The fact that I yell at my kids is a secret. We don't want our viewers to know.
Her whole thing is that everything stems from shame, which is just horrifying because she is the greatest perpetuator of shame.
I'm excited because I'm homeschooling all my kids now, and it's fun.
There's a lot I don't know that I know someone who does. Documentary and filmmaker and YouTube commentator, Swoop. She's been following this case closely for more than a year.
Check out this clip from Swoop.
Imagine you're in Utah. You're sitting on your porch one August morning, soaking in the crisp air and admiring the lush green trees surrounding you and the way the sun hits the Red Rock Mountains, creeping through the leaves and slowly reaching you on your porch. It's the kind of morning that makes you feel good to be alive, and you just know that the day is going to be great. But that's all just an illusion, one that's quickly shattered when you see the unmistakable shape of a small child wandering up to your house in an attempt to wave you down. As the boy gets closer, you start to notice something unusual wrapped around his ankles, and then you see there's this undeniable look of worry across his face. You ask him what happened, and he tells you he had to crawl through a window and that he is hungry, thirsty, and he blames himself. So you call 911. You explain everything he told you. Eventually, ambulances show up to help give aid, and the police head to the house he escaped from and discover others who are quickly taken to safety and proper care. And soon after, the police discover the woman responsible for this unbelievable scene and arrest her. The person who did this? Ruby Franke, the founder of the 8 Passengers YouTube family channel, mother to 6, and one of the most controversial figures seen on this platform ever. Meaning that for what may be the first time ever, a family vlogger may actually be on the receiving end of justice. And this is what we know. So here we are. This is part 2 of my ongoing series covering 8 Passengers, Ruby Franke, and the truly awful story that has unfolded. Now, if you haven't seen part 1 of my docu-series, I will have it linked below. It is absolutely wild, but what has happened over the last month is so much worse than I ever imagined. It's been all over the news worldwide. I mean, even in the last few weeks alone, I was interviewed on Good Morning America, appeared twice on Ashley Banfield's show on News Nation, all to speak about former YouTuber Ruby Franke.
This is a woman who at one point had 2.5 million subscribers to her YouTube channel. This is all about parenting. And now, after her arrest, one of her adult children posted a picture of authorities outside the home with the caption, "Finally."
YouTube documentarian Swoop has been following what happened.
She was often giving parental advice, and most of it seemed to showcase how she decided to punish her children in ways that became increasingly alarming and very questionable.
There is a lot to get caught up on and some truly bizarre details unfolding in this case, so buckle up, friends. But first, oh hi there, hello, hi, it's my face again, Swoop! If you are seeing me for the first time, welcome. I make documentaries and short films on unsolved cases, true crime, and social media influencers who abuse their power and manipulate audiences because, as I always say, it's not drama, it's dangerous. We also dig deeper into the root psychology, and sometimes we take it to Petty University, because honey, listen, okay? Petty is my coping mechanism for the bullshit. And yeah, you know what I'm saying. Now, real quick before I jump into the story and give you some updates with what's been going on with me, I want to give a huge thank you to our sponsor, Murder by Choice, and to all of you for being here. So, I don't know about you, but sometimes I just need to de-stress and unwind from a long day by playing some games and just forgetting the world around me. And lately, I have been loving Murder by Choice, a free, fully interactive mystery adventure game that takes place on a tropical island in modern times. So picture this, your name is Carla Page, and you're a young journalist who got an unexpected invitation from a billionaire to join his yearly private party on a tropical island. And I mean, who are you to turn down a billionaire, right? When you arrive, you find yourself surrounded by some of the richest, most powerful people in the world, but there's just one problem. A huge storm is approaching, leaving you stranded. But that's not all. Moments after arriving, a murder takes place, and it's up to you to get to the bottom of whodunit. I am obsessed with this game. It's fully interactive. You get to make choices that shape how the story unfolds while using your detective skills to uncover secrets, find hidden objects, and solve puzzles. But it's not just another hidden object game, okay? There is a ton of content, including comics, over 30 puzzles, 50 stunning illustrations and locations, which really caught my eye when I started playing, and most importantly, a mystery investigation where you look for clues and question characters. And y'all know I love a good investigation, okay? It's Swoop, that's what we do. And I know that you all do too, and let's be real, like, we could use some time away from social media every now and then with something fun like this. Every player has a unique experience, and with plot twists around every corner, I have been hooked on this game. Like, Carla is definitely my favorite character. I mean, she's a journalist. Come on, love that for us. And best of all, the game is free and available for iOS and Android. So if you're ready to solve some mysteries with this incredible game that you can play right on your phone, tap the link in the description box or use the QR code on the screen here to download the Murder by Choice game straight to your phone right now. And when you download right now using my special link, you'll receive a special energy gift inside that will help you progress even faster through the game. I absolutely love this game, and I know you will too, so download and start playing today because you deserve it, honey. Okay, back to the doc. I want to take a moment to say a quick thank you to all of you for being here and for spending your time with me week after week, and for all of you new faces who have found me as a result of my Colleen Ballinger 4-part docu-series. I am so excited to have you back as we get into new documentaries and new topics. Now, if you didn't know, I posted part 4 a couple of weeks ago, which featured my exclusive interview with Colleen Ballinger's ex-husband, Joshua David Evans, someone the world has waited to hear from for more than 7 years. If you haven't seen it, it is linked below, and thank you for giving me some time to recover. My team and I really, truly needed it. It was a lot. It was a huge undertaking, extremely mentally, emotionally, even physically exhausting. But I'm so excited to be back with all of you and to get back on a regular schedule. Also, real quick, I promise, a huge thank you to everyone who has grabbed your items so far from the brand new Petty University Valid apparel collection, like I'm wearing here. I have been absolutely mind blown by your response and support for the new collection. I have seen so many of your outfit photos. I designed this collection to display our core, our backbone of values, and to be a daily reminder to all of you who have lived through challenges, whether it be as a survivor or coping with anxiety, depression, invisible illness, or chronic pain, whatever it may be. I want you to have a reminder that you are valid and that you are so, so powerful and, you know, a little petty, okay? Just a touch. If you want to grab your pieces, the shop is linked below and in the pinned comment as always, and thank you with all of my heart for your kindness and also for supporting me as a woman-owned small business. It truly means so much, and I hope you love these pieces as much as I do. Oh, also, my gosh, my brand new second channel has officially launched. Okay, I can't believe we're doing this. My first video is now live on my second channel. It is a follow-up to my part 4 of the Colleen Ballinger docu-series, where I break down Colleen's return, her own sister admitting Trent Ballinger is dangerous, yeah. And we break down the JoJo Siwa interview, as well as I answer some questions that I've been seeing online after my series posted as we were conducting the investigation. So that is linked below. Please do subscribe. I will still be doing my regular deep dive documentaries right here on the main channel, so don't worry. Those just take a little bit longer to produce, obviously. So this will allow me to be able to post more often on a ton of different stories that I just want to cover, but we never have time to do here. So please subscribe and join me on my brand new second channel linked below, and leave the comment, "Welcome to the Suspool," so I know that you came from this video. Okay, as we get into this Ruby Franke story, I want to give a heads up that any potential sensitive information will be censored and there will be no graphic or detailed discussions to make sure that we adhere to the platform's policies and to make this doc as digestible and watchable as possible for all of you. I want to continue to create a space where we can talk about these important stories and find some learning to better help all of you protect yourself and your loved ones. We are going to focus today on the adults in this story and how the hell it even got to this point, okay? Trust me, a bitch got thoughts, and we gonna get into them. Please do form your own opinion, and as always, please do not spread any hate on any platform ever, and be respectful in the comments. Let's dig in. It's been nearly 10 years since the birth of the 8 Passengers YouTube channel, one of the most infamously awful family channels that has ever graced the platform. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the 8 Passengers channel, again, you can get caught up with part 1 linked below, where we covered the nightmare quite exhaustively until the timeline ended around early 2023. But if you only have time for one 8 Passengers story today, then I will do my best to briefly catch you up to speed so you have an idea what's going on. So 8 Passengers was a YouTube channel run by a woman named Ruby Franke and her husband Kevin, documenting their day-to-day life with their 6 kids in Utah. Now listen, y'all, okay? This topic just really pisses me right off. So I'm just letting you know, Ruby Franke is officially the first member of what I have branded the Suspool. Yes, the Suspool. It's like cesspool, except this is the place where everyone is suspicious, okay? They're all sus, and I am throwing them all in a pool where they will fester until we can weed out who is to be trusted and who will remain sus, okay? The Suspool with Swoop, here we are. If you're familiar at all with the landscape of all the family channels that I have covered here, you can probably fill in the gaps on how bad the 8 Passengers channel was. But unlike many of the other channels, like the Hildebrandt family, the Ace family, or Daddy of 5, all members of the Suspool, it didn't take long for 8 Passengers to go mask off, because there never really was a mask being worn in the first place.
My bedroom was taken away for 7 months, and then you give it back like a couple weeks ago.
I don't think our viewers know that. You've been sleeping on a beanbag.
I've been sleeping on a beanbag since October. And they gave my room back like 2 weeks ago.
From 2015 to 2023, Ruby and Kevin posted some rather questionable parenting advice, to say the least, and showed some frankly upsetting examples of what they viewed as acceptable disciplinary measures to enforce on their family. Now, what do I mean? I mean things like sending their kids to school without lunch.
I just got a text message from Eve's teacher, and she said that Eve did not pack a lunch today, and can I bring a lunch over to the school? This happens quite often when you're raising children, because I know that her teacher is uncomfortable with her being hungry and not having a lunch, and it would ease her discomfort if I came to the school with a lunch. But I responded and just said, Eve is responsible for making her lunches in the morning, and she actually told me she did pack a lunch. So the natural outcome is she's just going to need to be hungry.
Or withholding breakfast until her kids finish their chores.
You don't need food.
You know that saying, like, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck? Well, 8 Passengers was kind of like that, except instead of ducks quacking, it was parents doing questionable things to their kids.
There are a lot of comments online about 8 Passengers and Ruby Franke's parenting style. Check out this clip from Swoop on YouTube.
Now, Ruby seems to structure her entire parenting style around using the vlog to trap her children in conversations they sure look like they'd rather have off camera. I mean, sometimes they literally say that. Often she's asked to stop filming, and when she does get them on camera, it's clear that they're uncomfortable sharing how they feel with hundreds of thousands of people, no matter how Ruby tries to cut around it.
I'm gonna get down on your level. I've noticed that you've been hiding from me.
That's a good taste of what this channel was about. A lot of this channel was about.
Now, I don't know, y'all, maybe I shouldn't be surprised at this point, but there was an audience for this kind of content too, with the 8 Passengers channel reaching an estimated 2.3 million followers at its height. Now, to put that in perspective, when I covered the Daddy of 5 controversy, a family channel that dabbled in similar duck quackery, we'll call it, because yeah, that channel had never even reached a full 1 million subscribers before the controversy hit its peak. This means that 8 Passengers Passengers was more successful with more than double the subscribers over the same amount of time, all while similar conversations were being had with the general public around what was happening in their content. Now, after Ruby Franke and Kevin's controversies became too much to ignore, 8 Passengers got the attention of the rest of the internet, stoking outrage. Videos were made all over this platform demanding the 8 Passengers page be shut down, and petitions were made asking protective services to look into obviously troubling behavior and take custody of the other 6 passengers away from the captains at the front of this ridiculous ship. Sadly, that didn't happen soon enough. Now, earlier this year, the 8 Passengers channel was finally taken down for reasons that aren't fully clear, but Ruby and Kevin Franke remained awful and at large until...
Popular Utah family vlogger Ruby Franke was arrested Wednesday.
A Utah woman who gave online parenting advice through a once popular YouTube channel has now been arrested.
The arrest of a popular YouTube mom known for her strict parenting style.
On August 31st, 2023, Ruby Franke and her partner were arrested after a truly horrifying discovery by Utah residents of a 12-year-old boy walking around a neighborhood in a physical condition that I'm not going to describe in detail. I'm sure many of you have heard the news reports and read the media coverage, which goes into great detail about his condition and the condition of others. Now, according to multiple accounts, he was looking for food and water and was later revealed to be one of Ruby Franke's sons who had been detained over at her partner's home in Ivins, Utah. What's worse is that after investigating Ruby's partner's home, one of her daughters was also found in a similar condition. Now, most importantly, these young people are safe. That's why I'm focused on the adults today, because possibly none of this would have come to light if it weren't for the bravery exhibited by Ruby's son and the man who found him in the first place.
I'm on the address of your emergency. Okay, and the phone number you're calling from. Tell me exactly what's happened.
What you're hearing right now is the 911 call from August 30th, the day that Ruby's son was found on a neighbor's porch in Utah.
Show up here at my front door asking for help. And he's said he just came from a neighbor's house, and we know there's been problems at this neighbor's house. He's hungry and he's thirsty.
Okay. Is your door locked?
No, I'm sitting outside with him on the front patio. He says he just left through the porch at the neighbor's house, and she lives 2 doors up the street. He rang my doorbell and asked me to call the police.
Let's get the paramedics headed over that way, okay?
Oh, that's a good idea, too.
Let's see. Has he told you where his mom or dad are?
No, he doesn't see them. He says he knows where his mom is, but...
he doesn't know where his dad is?
That's correct.
Is his mom home?
Is your mom around here? Have you seen her lately? He doesn't know where she is right now.
Does he know his mom's name?
What's your mom's name? Ruby Franke is his mom's name.
So in case you missed that, Ruby's son said that he wasn't actually at his own home. He doesn't know where his mom Ruby is. Now, I've left out a little part of this call for reasons I will get into a little later, but my very first question here is, how did Ruby's son wind up at a house he doesn't live at in this condition? This is a question that we still to this day do not have a clear answer on yet, and I hope that we will soon.
He says what's happened to him is his fault.
After everything that her son went through, her son gets asked how this happened, and he says it's his fault. And I just hope that he has learned by now in a safe environment that none of this was his fault. Like, this is sadly the feeling that many who have been harmed by someone else feel. Shame, guilt. I'm sure many of you have struggled with those feelings after surviving something terrible. And I don't want to get too sidetracked, but real quick, if you leave here today with only one thing, please know what you have survived at the hands of others is not your fault. I say that a lot in these documentaries. I will keep saying it forever. I blamed myself for years over what happened to me as a survivor. Trust me, I get it. But you don't have to live with that guilt, because the shame is their burden to carry, never yours. And I mean that. You are valid and it is not your fault. And that fully applies to Ruby's son too, regardless of the shit that she's going to say later, which we will get into. Moving on. Now, we do know from Kevin's attorney that shortly after their son escaped, Ruby contacted Kevin saying it was an emergency.
Where was he when he found out about this?
He was at work.
And how did he find out? He found out on the news? Did someone call him?
He got a call from Ruby. She had heard what was going on and knew they were coming for her and called him.
So y'all listen, I want to know, okay, if Ruby was totally innocent here, why did she call Kevin when her son was potentially missing? Why didn't she call the police? This indicates to me that Ruby not only knew her son was there, allegedly, but knew that if he had gotten out, that he was not in good condition, and if anyone found him, there would be all kinds of red flags and alarms ringing, and that police would likely be called because of his condition, which then tells me that Ruby knew what was happening in that house and knew that it was wrong and something she had to hide from law enforcement. Allegedly. I gotta say that. Now, shortly after that call, Ruby and her partner were arrested and held under suspicion of 2 charges of a similar nature. Yes, they're in the Suspool now, and by the next day, those 2 charges became 6 charges related not only to the physical allegations, with each charge carrying a potential prison sentence of up to 10 years and a fine of $10,000. So that could mean up to 60 years in prison if Ruby was found guilty and served the max consecutively. Now listen, I get it, all right? It's innocent until proven guilty, etc., blah, blah, blah. But listen, duct tape, escape through a window. You probably know where my head is at with this potential trial at this very moment. Now, in the weeks following this arrest, this has become the most recent example of a celebrity legal case that is grabbing the attention of social media for better and for worse, unfortunately. Like, go on TikTok and you'll see thousands of posts with hundreds of millions of views with the hashtag Ruby Franke. And you go on YouTube and you'll see video after video providing coverage of this case from creators as wide-ranging as Emily D. Baker, Adam McIntyre, Radiant Britt, and of course me here. Like the day of Ruby's hearing, which I'll be addressing later, search interest for Ruby spiked more than it ever has in the history of 8 Passengers existing. Now, I will say just a quick sidebar. If you're looking for the best legal coverage on this story and honestly any other true crime or pop culture case, please check out Emily D. Baker. I have just the highest respect for her and the work that she is doing. She's been a licensed attorney for over 17 years. She was the LA County Deputy District Attorney, and she is, in my opinion, like just the most incredible legal analyst and commentator on YouTube. I think she is hilarious, she is down to earth, and she's so smart. And I've learned so much from her when she breaks down cases that we often cover here. I'll link her podcast episode on this story in the description where she breaks down the criminal charges against Ruby Franke and her partner. I think it's the best way to understand what they're currently facing and what you might be able to expect with a pending trial. So I couldn't recommend Emily D. Baker enough. She is top tier quality on this platform. Please do check her out. Now, much of the social media interest here has to do with the very concept of family vlog channels in general. A concept so infamous that I've done like half a dozen videos about many family channels like the LeBrants and the many videos I've done on the Ace family and Daddy of 5 and 8 Passengers, of course, and countless other YouTubers have been speaking on the topic for nearly a decade. Now, not every family channel is made equally. This is not meant as a critique upon every single channel under the sun, but the coverage all brings up a justified debate on whether or not it's even appropriate to monetize the growth and the mess ups, the discipline, the struggles, and even the well-being of your children for audiences that often range in the hundreds of thousands to millions of eyes consuming the content. Many of those eyeballs are quite questionable. Now, Ruby Franke is what can charitably be called a momfluencer, a noteworthy influencer who happens to be a mom and bases most of her content off of being a mom. Ruby happens to be one of those momfluencers who just live to preach about her parenting methods and her disciplinary style, and generally just how amazing she thinks every word from her mouth is. I mean, if she farts, she'll smell it and tell you it's the most beautiful scent in the world, right? So for her to be arrested for actions relating to her parenting, well, there's a bit of an irony in that, isn't there, Ruby? Why don't you have a seat, Ruby? I'm sorry, y'all know, okay, petty is my coping mechanism, and I do not have a lot of patience for people like Ruby. So I will try to contain myself, but also that, Ruby. Ruby, listen, come here, Ruby. Bring it in. Okay, that's close enough. Ruby, I'm curious. Do you remember what I said to you in part 1 before any of this escalated to the nightmare that your actions have become? Do you remember? You were right? No, you don't remember? Okay, well, let me refresh your memory, Ruby. Bad, Ruby, no. Have several seats. Ruby, I have fresh, wet cement sitting in the back now. I'm gonna pave a bench. I'm gonna ask you to have a seat, and then you're just gonna be permanently cemented down there for a while so you can think about what the you're doing. Ruby, you didn't sit down and think about your actions, did you, Ruby? You went from being one of the more notorious mommy vloggers on the planet who took joy in rejecting the public's longtime appeals to do better for your family to a straight-up criminal. Allegedly, since as of me recording this, your court case is still pending, so, you know. But who knows, Ruby, if they find you guilty, maybe you and your partner can get out and you can rebrand from 8 passengers to 2 prisoners. Get yourself a deal on Fox News, baby. Come on, roll the dice. Ruby needs a new pair of shoes after the ankle monitor comes off after 60 years from now. Allegedly. Okay, sorry. One of the biggest problems I think that exists with Ruby and Kevin Franke, though, and I need to speak frankly for a second, and hear me out, please, is that they're both incredibly f***ing boring. The most wonder-bred kind of parents, the sleepiest chamomile tea of people, a 1,000-page book report on a 2-page document, and don't take this the wrong way. I'm not saying that we need the subjects in every doctor that we do to be some kind of like outlandish, over-the-top character. What I'm saying is that Ruby and Kevin being so boring, so unremarkable, so deeply uninteresting as members of the Suspool is that it's really easy to ignore them because they don't seem evil. They don't seem like anything at all. And that's what makes them so scary. All right, listen, and then we will get back to the story. Have you ever heard of the phrase, the banality of evil? It refers to the idea that people can often do evil things without actually having evil intentions or even thinking about the evil in it. In the process of doing so, evil actions seem ordinary, very bland, normalized, part of your day-to-day life. Like if nobody's telling you that what you're doing is wrong, then is it actually wrong to you? After all, you're just doing your job. Like in Ruby Franke's case, she's just being a parent, according to her. Now, the banality of evil is a pretty common turn of phrase now, and it's popped up when referring to everything from family channel vloggers to even the complacency that allows bad things to happen to people due to a general indifference and apathy from the public at large. Now, you may be surprised to learn that the phrase is actually pretty new too, having been created by journalist Hannah Arendt, who traveled to Israel back in 1962 to cover the trial of a man named Eichmann, one of the architects of the most horrendous events that happened in Germany that I am not even sure I'm allowed to say the name of here, but you probably know what I'm talking about. Where the term banality of evil comes from is put best by writer Peter Christoph for The Conversation, who claims, quote, Arendt concluded that Eichmann was so morally vacant in his eager adherence, indeed narcissistic devotion, to regulatory order that he was an almost comic figure. For her, he was neither symbol nor symptom nor scapegoat, yet he also represented and embodied something more terrifying through his vicious compliance. Her phrase for this, the banality of evil, did not trivialize the evil to which he contributed. What Christoph is saying is that Eichmann was addicted to keeping things to a routine, keeping the wheels turning, and treating every facet of what he's did, those atrocities, as a job. The way he described what happened in Germany, according to Hannah Arendt, was no different than a white-collar worker describing like TPS reports or a mechanic running down a list of problems in a car. To Eichmann, this was business as usual. So you're asking, Swoop, why are you bringing all of this up in relation to Ruby Franke? There is a point, I promise. And that point is the casual indifference Ruby and Kevin Franke seem to feel and have always shown, in my opinion, in regards to their parenting styles. Criticisms of the 8 Passengers channel have existed almost as long as the channel has been online, and the sheer, through the motions portrayal of their lives at home is just so eerie. There's little to no fun for the young ones, little to no humor, and every bad reaction from Ruby or Kevin is treated as just another way that parenting needs to be done that day. Routine. the job. Now, obviously what Kevin and Ruby have done with this channel is not comparable to what happened in Germany, so don't get it twisted. I am not doing that thing where people compare everything to that. But this concept of the banality of evil applies, I think, to Ruby and Kevin, because I don't believe for 1 second that Ruby or Kevin would be showing any remorse if they hadn't been caught by law enforcement. Now, my part 1 doc came out earlier this year. The 8 Passengers channel has existed since 2015. They don't care. And that's what makes both of them such incredibly disturbing figures on the internet, in my opinion, because they're boring. Allegedly. And you should never, ever underestimate the power of boring and benign as deterrence for people to pay attention to an atrocity. Now, shortly after Ruby was arrested, her sisters Ellie and Bonnie and Julie, who are also family content creators, released a joint statement on Instagram revealing that they had been concerned for quite some time about Ruby's style of parenting, but had kept quiet to protect the safety of Ruby's kids. Quote, "For the last 3 years, we have kept quiet on the subject of our sister Ruby Franke for the sake of her children. Behind the public scene, we have done everything we could to try and make sure the kids were safe. We wouldn't feel right about moving forward with regular content without addressing the most recent events. Once we do, we will not be commenting on it further. Ruby was arrested, which needed to happen. The kids are now safe, which is the #1 priority." Now, over the course of the following weeks, because I don't think the public took very kindly to that statement, 2 of Ruby's sisters made more thorough statements on their own YouTube channels. Bonnie's video was titled, "I am not my sister, I am not my sister's crimes," so you can imagine what the feedback was on their statement for her to title her video that. And over the course of the video, Bonnie reveals that what Ruby did has directly led to a massive fracture in the family itself, claiming that this is the worst thing that has ever happened to the family.
What my family and I have gone through the last couple of weeks is the worst thing that has ever happened. The more I learn, my feelings are turning more to anger. I am mad. I am mad. The first thing that I want to say is that we have kept quiet for 3 years on the topic of our sister Ruby. That is what we have stayed quiet about. We did not know what they were doing because, like you said, we were cut off.
Now, I gotta be honest here. I'm really struggling to get past the whole how did this happen vibe. I don't want to sound at all harsh on her or the rest of Ruby's family, as obviously they're not at fault for what has happened. It's just hard, you know, like it's hard to feel like they didn't see the signs. #1, this has been public knowledge for years. #2, she even says that in her video.
We have kept quiet for 3 years on the topic of our sister Ruby.
Bonnie says she's known for 3 years the extent of the indoctrination and bullcrap.
My thought towards Ruby is that it was all bullcrap. I don't agree with how extreme they are on everything. I knew they were weird. Those are the things that we kept quiet about, because what was I gonna say? I was not gonna come out and publicly say that I don't like my sister and I don't like what she was doing.
What would have happened if they had made a more public, constant calling for an investigation? Could applying direct public pressure straight from the family who knows Ruby best have inspired the police to look into this further before it escalated? Now, Julie DeRue, Ruby's other sister, also posted a video titled "My Side of the Story Concerning My Sister Ruby Franke."
I am not going to be a news update. I will not update you on news. I will not give all of the little nitty-gritty details. I know I don't need to sit here and defend myself. I know I don't need to go into the history of what has happened. So we'll see where this goes and how much I get into.
In the video, she explains that despite the questionable behavior seen in the 8 Passengers videos, it wasn't until Kevin and Ruby entered family counseling back in 2020 that things started to escalate in a huge way. Now, of course, They have different insight than we do. From the outside, though, things seemed like they had escalated quite sooner than that in a lot of the vlog content. But you know, we're just observing.
3 years ago, Ruby, everything was great. It seemed to be fine anyway. We were a typical family. She was getting some therapy counseling because their family needed it, which I think is great. We all saw it. We weren't comfortable with it. We didn't like it. We didn't like the teachings Ruby was bringing to the family functions, and we were this close to telling her, if you come to our family events anymore, we do not want to hear what you were learning. Anyway, so 3 years ago, Ruby and I hung out bottling tomatoes, and then a few weeks later, crap hit the fan and she left the family. So she started all of her lies back then, lying to everyone in her life.
It wasn't until about a year ago when we were able to reconnect with Sherry. And it was then that we were learning slowly bits and pieces of more.
I was very fortunate to have been able to reach out to her daughter Sherry once she was an adult, and we were able to form a really close, strong relationship, which I am grateful for. And it was then that I learned more about Ruby, and it was then that Sherry had learned about lies that had been told to her.
And for those that were saying that they'd go in and bust down doors and do whatever it took to end up in jail, because from jail, I can't do anything. So I still stand by what I said, is that I did everything that I could.
I just have yet to understand them saying we kept quiet publicly to help protect the kids. I don't quite know how that protects the kids. Maybe some more information will come out and that will make more sense, but right now it just does not to me. And while I'm not trying to come after the sisters, and unfortunately now they are easy targets because they are speaking after the fact, but in all honesty, I have been concerned about the level of focus the sisters have had on making content and how this interrupted their content and how they wanted to get back to their content, and not much discussion or mention on what they knew for years was happening.
I am mad. This is where my anger comes in. Their actions have cast the worst light on me, on other members of our family. I didn't post because I physically couldn't. I just stood by Joel's side, building our home, and it sounds incredibly selfish, me thinking of our house, but also I have watched him put his heart and soul and every waking minute for the last couple of years on this project. And I will not allow Ruby and Kevin to take away one more thing.
And perhaps what concerns me the most now is that both Bonnie and Julie are family vloggers who have not denounced vlogging their own kids or denounced the type of family vlogging that Ruby has done. Why?
Like Bonnie mentioned in her video, we are not going to let Ruby destroy another thing in our lives. We have our platforms where we try and bring brightness and positivity into other people's lives, and that is why we didn't talk about Ruby in our content for the past 3 years. Yeah, we try and show the highs and lows of everyday family and parenting, but Ruby's topic was not supposed to be part of that content. However, as far as my platforms go, I do want to continue them, but the content will probably look a little bit different. I have some pre-recorded videos before all of this fell apart that I will be posting. So if you have been a long-time viewer and you have stuck around, thank you so much for your love and support. And if you are new to my channel, welcome.
Now, Ruby's oldest daughter, Sherry, who is now an adult and therefore the only Frankie child I will be naming, also spoke out against Ruby, posting a picture of a police car to her Instagram stories with the caption, "Finally." She later said, quote, "Me and my family are so glad justice is being served. We've been trying to tell the police and CPS for years about this, and so glad they finally decided to step up. Kids are safe, but there's a long road ahead. Please keep them in your prayers and also respect their privacy." I can't even imagine what Sherry is going through seeing her mother and her siblings in this situation, and I wish her the best and healing as all of this continues to unfold. The fact that she's saying, you know, finally justice is being served tells me that she's been carrying these feelings for a very long time.
And the 20-year-old said, finally, she's been arrested. Finally. She's been on their radar for 4 years. She's got a husband named Kevin Franke who says, oh, I didn't know, we're separated for more than a year. Except that these folks have been on their radar for 4 years with the complaints. There's a lot I don't know that I know someone who does. Documentary and filmmaker and YouTube commentator who's got the name Swoop. She's been following this case closely for more than a year, made a documentary. What have I missed in this horrendous narrative that I've just laid out?
Well, Ashley, first, thank you for having me. And I don't think that you've missed much in terms of you've hit some really key points. Even when you first mentioned that some people might look at this type of behavior that's been displayed in Ruby's vlogs and think that, oh, well, if it's not physical in those instances, that it's somehow not a but we need to also remember the very key factor here, which is mental, psychological. In seeing the fact that Ruby was willing to vlog this type of behavior and put it out into the world that this is the way that you should be handling and punishing your children if they act out in ways that you don't want to. So we saw so many examples contained in her own vlogs that she thought was even safe and fine to be broadcasting to the world and be profiting off of at their expense, and things that they can't even consent to.
Now, for all y'all who've been paying attention to the 8 Passengers saga as it's been playing out online, what's happening to Ruby Franke only comes as a surprise in regards to just how unlikely it is for family channels like these to actually see anything resembling justice be dealt to them. But just like any other story that I cover on my channel, the story of Ruby Franke is the story of a real, living, breathing person whose actions affect other real people, and not just her kids. Even her neighbors have been scared of Ruby for quite a while. One neighbor told NBC News, quote, "Everyone is just breathing a collective sigh of relief because we thought the police were going to come out of that house with body bags." Isn't that just a lovely sentiment to believe about your neighbor? That the way that Ruby Franke treats her loved ones is so bad that there was a fear that body bags were going to come out of that house. So for those of you playing at home, all of your worst fears were correct. Not only is this how Ruby is on camera, this is also how she was off camera, allegedly, like many of us suspected all along. It's why I made part 1 of the series, hoping to be another voice in the world saying, "What the f***, Ruby? Sit down and get your together." And it's something that's been happening for many, many, many years. KUTV out of Utah made a report earlier in September that revealed, for instance, that over a dozen calls were made to law enforcement regarding 2 houses owned by Ruby over the course of many years, with incident reports actually not being created for many of those calls. Most of these calls took place in 2022 and 2023, with 4 instances alone having to involve DCFS, or Department of Child and Family Service workers. Now, one of those instances was on September 18th, 2022, just over a year ago, when Springfield police received a call for a welfare check from Sherry Franke, who claimed that her siblings had been left home alone for 5 days, young siblings, while Ruby Franke was visiting St. George, Utah, which is about 10 miles away from home. 10 miles. Do you know how long it takes to drive 10 miles in the middle of bare-ass flat road Utah? Like 15 minutes max if you're taking in the views, meaning this woman couldn't be bothered to drive 15 minutes home to care for her kids. Instead, they had to fend for themselves for 5 days. Now, when police arrived for that welfare check, the Franke bunch wouldn't answer the door, but according to the report about the incident, officers could see that the young ones were indeed home alone, and later, neighbors would reveal that this was the running theme for Ruby. But even before incidences like these, when Ruby and Kevin lived in Springville, Utah from 2012 to 2020, a dozen calls were made specifically regarding that address. Now, not every call was a welfare check, with some of the calls being related to traffic stops, but a few of the calls involved DCFS, and I don't know, it seems pretty f***ing weird that it's been over a decade and the police have had to go to this one house and get DCFS involved so many times, right? And the big question that I keep coming back to is, what is an acceptable amount of times for protective services to get involved? Is it once? Twice? Thrice? Is it quarce? Yes. I said it, quarce. I am pissed, okay? I am making up words. That's how I cope with Ruby's quack shittery that's going on right now. Anyways, the question at hand, how many times does it take for DCFS to show up? Well, the right answer is, hold on, let me check. Oh yeah, zero times. It should take 0 times for them to be called because you're not being a dreadful human. So 0 calls would have been the acceptable answer there because you don't suck. But I've only told you about the calls from 2012 to 2020 and 2022 to 23. Between 2020 and 2021, there were an additional 9 calls made on the Franke family, with 4 of them involving DCFS. How many licks does it take to get to the center of this bullshit? So, what the hell happened? Why were they not investigated at all? How did we get here? And listen, I know that services like DCFS are underfunded, understaffed, and over-needed. But what is happening? If her son hadn't have crawled out the window, how many more calls would have been made? How far would those neighbors' fears of bags coming out of the house eventually been what happened? Now, throughout all of this, you've probably noticed that I've been a little dodgy with some of my descriptors. Y'all are very smart. I know you picked up on this. I hear some of y'all out there like, Swoop, what do you mean Ruby's partner was arrested with her? Her racquetball partner, her tea club partner, her boring Chick-fil-A protest partner? To which I say it's not any of those, and I don't even know what a tea club is. I don't know why I said that. But here's the thing. When I say partner, I am referring to her business partner and her partner in crime. I'd like to welcome our newest member to the Suspool, where the sludge continues to boil. It was a woman named Jodi Hildebrandt.
We want you to then be thoughtful about what you think is going on, and instead of just reacting to the statements that are made or the questions that are asked, we are interested in when you feel triggered.
Jodi and I have each shared an example from our own lives of what real love looks like, which isn't what the world thinks is love. They'd push back and say, whoa, that's mean.
Now, for those of you who didn't see part 1, Jodi Hildebrandt was somebody who Ruby had hitched her horse to as a part of a company known as Connections, an alleged mental health counseling company that also doubled as a bit of a low-rent multimedia empire, with the 2 of them appearing in videos together on the now deleted Connections channel. Now, I've introduced Jodi a little bit back in part 1, but I've decided to give her more of a spotlight right now, not just because she was arrested with Ruby, but because there is a very real chance that not only is Jodi Hildebrandt just as bad as Ruby allegedly is, but according to Kevin Franke's lawyer and one of Jodi's own family members, she might actually be the ringleader or the spearhead, the mastermind of this entire operation.
I think it was a team effort, but with Jodi being the spearhead and creating a situation that's just caused all of this destruction of his family.
Let me back this up a little bit, because I think it's important to know exactly why Jodi could possibly be the mastermind spearhead of this whole operation and how something like that could even happen. Now, for the time being, we'll be kind of stepping away from the central crime of how Ruby and Jodi were even put into a position to be arrested for duck quackery in the first place. And yes, I hate having to censor, but here we are. And I promise you, not only will all of this make Jodi Hildebrandt make a little more sense in the context of this story, but it will also make Ruby's place in Jodi Hildebrandt's story make a lot more sense too. So, Jodi Hildebrandt was born in June of 1969, currently making her 54 years old. She's the child of 2 members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, aka the LDS Church, aka she's Mormon. Now, normally I wouldn't find it necessary to bring up somebody's faith, but Jodi's Mormon faith actually plays a massive and kind of terrifying role in why she is the way she is. Now, back in 2003, Jodi got herself a master's degree in counseling psychology at the University of Utah, meaning she is a licensed counselor, aside from the, well, you know, there was just this small little 18-month period where her license was suspended for divulging patient information to people who weren't authorized to receive it. You know, no big. Who needs medical privacy? We'll get into that a little later. Now, Jodi is actually the founder of Connections, a mental wellness group whose curriculum was inspired by Jodi's old job at Cirque Lodge, a celebrity rehab center in Utah that has treated everyone from Eva Mendes to The Situation. Yeah, you remember the situation, Jersey Shore? Yeah, Jody, or at least her place of work, helped him get sober. Good for him. So she then used her time helping treat the situation by creating her own situation with the Connections 101 course, a series of counseling programs designed to, as the mission statement on her website says, and her website is still up, quote, invite and encourage healing and facilitate personal growth through impeccable honesty, rigorous personal responsibility, and vulnerable humility. Now, let's break that down to the simplest version possible. Connections believes that people get better by being honest, focusing on yourself, and eliminating any sense of ego from the equation. On the surface, it sounds okay, right? In my opinion, it also sounds pretty simple. And unfortunately, simplicity comes at a cost. $75 a week for 90-minute group sessions moderated by Jody, or a whopping $14,985 business session spread across 18 weeks that helps foster strength and company leadership. And if I'm being honest, as simple as the key lessons of Connections sound, Jodi Hildebrandt's website makes it all sound a lot more complicated than it really is. Quote, the core techniques of Connections is that for a person to achieve true connection with another human being, they must not be in distortion. Distortion is a broad term defined by Jodi. By taking her course, people learn that they are in distortion by the following: being addicted to your spouse, work, shopping, electronic games, sleep, social media, driving, receiving compliments, exercise, eating, drugs, alcohol, hobbies, entertainment. Like, the things you can become addicted to are endless. Also, living in shame and denial, knowing you are not enough, being codependent in your relationships, living in lust, being attracted to your spouse, because that's bad, controlling and manipulating others. Wow. I mean, seriously, did every single one of you just sit there just now and think, oh shit, I'm distorted? That's by design. Jodi Hildebrandt believes, or at least preaches, teaches, word vomits out the corner of her mouth, that everyone is experiencing distortion. And quote, she can help you overcome distortion and live in truth. Now, to find the truth, all class members reinforce the 3 principles of her course, which, remember, are impeccable honesty, self-responsibility, and absolute humility, by calling other members of the program whenever they start to feel distorted. Interestingly, men are only allowed to call men, women are only allowed to call women. This is isolation at its finest. A very nice little patriarchal twist on the idea that all living is sinful. Nice move, Jodi. And to make the incentive that much more worthwhile, for the low, low price of, I don't know, your soul. Each week in Connections, class had students take public accountability for how many phone calls were made that week. Now, my favorite part about this is that the next line on Jodi's website says, quote, even though shame is discussed at length in the course, this is not considered public shaming. Absolutely super cool point there, Jodi. Make your students talk about their feelings of shame and then incentivize the amount of people they talk about their shame with, and then talk about that shame in front of everybody. That's not public shaming at all. Sorry, y'all, my petty is, it's creeping up. These people make me feel some type of way. It must just be a coincidence that I found this little thing where a man named Trey Warner accuses you, Jodi, of using, and these are his words, shaming tactics in marriage counseling.
It started to feel more and more evil. And I finally, in one of the group meetings, I got up and I just said, this is off.
This is Trey Warner, a man who was having a bit of a tough time managing his marriage, when a friend told him that Jodi Hildebrandt and her Connections program could help him live a happier life with a happier wife. According to Trey, he liked these sessions at first, but slowly started to become more and more suspicious of Jodi as time went on, claiming that she would lean heavily into the theory of distortion by claiming that men's impure thoughts by nature made them distorted and therefore dangerous to their families. Quote, there was a man that had a successful business that believed he was a danger to his wife and his family because he did a double take, like if he saw a beautiful woman and he would see and look again. This guy got his own apartment and separated from his family because he was a danger. So what Trey's describing is a man looking at a woman that isn't his wife. You know, like when you're like walking down the street and like, you know, the woman goes by and then the guy goes like this, and then does a double take. That's what they're talking about here. This man got a whole ass other apartment and moved out because he thought that doing this was dangerous to his family. To me, it seems counterintuitive to the health of a couple to say that a double take is inherently dangerous and you need to move out the house. Trey even alleged that some husbands, by being forced to separate from their families on account of this sort of behavior, considered self-harm. Quote, they would feel so awful because they didn't follow through with what the goal was or didn't follow the boundaries, that they felt so sick and like such a failure that just felt like they shouldn't be here anymore. I can't think of a more horrible therapy if it's leaving people feeling like they shouldn't be here anymore. And all of this got me incredibly curious as to how this line of thinking, that casual, impure thoughts were damn near criminal, where did this come from? And I found some information both kind of disturbing and fascinating, and I think it sheds a lot of light on who Jodi Hildebrandt is and how the situation has escalated to such an extreme. And it all ties back to some teachings from some people within the Mormon church. Now, I want to preface this by stating first, I am not a Mormon, and I am not making broad, sweeping claims about the Mormon faith. No one is a monolith. No one person represents an entire faith in these conversations. It would be counterproductive to trying to learn about the realities here. Now, in the same breath, I do think having a wider understanding of principles that some people take to extremes is important to better see warning signs and help protect any of you who might be facing similar struggles. So, while investigating, I came across this incredibly informative podcast called Mormon Stories Podcast. It is a nonprofit show hosted by Dr. John Dehlin, a clinical and counseling psychologist, and the emphasis on the content is helping people who either wish to transition away from the faith, do it with mental health support, as well as, quote, building greater awareness regarding accurate LDS Mormon church history, doctrine, and theology, so that both active, believing Mormons and investigators of the church can make informed decisions regarding their involvement in and encouragement with the church. They are here to help support people of the faith. Now, they have been covering this story extensively, conducting many interviews with some of the alleged victims. And in one of the episodes, Dr. Dehlin dug into some of the historical scriptures that have come out of the church regarding impure thoughts and impure deviance that I thought was very interesting.
So, in Mormonism, it is absolutely fundamental core doctrine that the worst sin that anyone can commit is denying the Holy Ghost. In other words, having a confirmation that the Mormon church is true and then denying it publicly. That is the only sin that sends you to what's called outer darkness, which is not even hell, not even heaven. It's this place of eternal nothingness and torment. That's the worst thing you can possibly do. The next worst thing you can possibly do is murder. That's sin number 2. What Alma does in the Book of Mormon is says right under murder, sexual indiscretion is the worst possible sin you can do.
According to the text that Dr. Dehlin is referencing here, impure thoughts or behaviors were considered almost as bad as the taking of a life. That is intense. He goes on to give some more examples.
So you got the Bible laying the foundation in Mormonism for the Frankie family and 8 passengers and Jodi Hildebrandt. You got the Book of Mormon building on top of that. And the last element that you need that all of this springs out of, you need modern day Mormon prophets, seers, and revelators. The first one that I'm going to read is Heber J. Grant, the 7th Mormon prophet that lived in the mid-20th century. There's no true Latter-day Saint who would not rather bury a son or a daughter than to have him or her lose his or her chastity, or I'll say moral purity, realizing that chastity is of more value than anything else in the world. And you think, oh, well, that's just 70, 80, years ago. That's not the Mormon church today. Well, let's see. Let's go to David O. McKay, the 9th Mormon prophet. He is quoted as saying, "Your virtue is worth more than your life. Please, young folk, preserve your virtue even if you lose your lives.
Now, learning about this got me thinking, and again, we're not here to judge a whole faith. Please do remain respectful. We are just looking at how this might apply to Ruby and Kevin Franke as we go through this story. So in part 1, I covered some of the most alarming parts of Ruby's vlogs, one of which you may remember was regarding her oldest son, who is an adult now, who was banned from having a bedroom. And there was something about they had to remove the door so he couldn't have privacy and was made to sleep out in the open on a beanbag for like 7 months. He was also sent to Anasazi boot camp for nearly 2 months, and they were always very just kind of hush-hush about this. Ruby, a woman who had zero problem vlogging every single violating detail of her family, was suddenly tight-lipped about all of this.
Well, you know it's a serious video when it's me sitting down and talking, but if it's the two of us sitting down and talking, it's like
even more serious.
Really.
Chad today has just entered the Anasazi Foundation Wilderness Therapy Program. So you're probably wondering, what did Chad do? Okay, we're not even going to entertain that stuff.
Now, there's a part of me that wonders if Ruby might have accused her son of having impure thoughts or behaviors, and maybe that's why they not only stripped him of having any privacy in a door, but also sent him away to Anasazi, a behavioral boot camp, to maybe straighten him out.
The Mormon Church does not ever renounce the past statements of its prophets, seers, and revelators. So all of these horrendous quotes that I just read you exist today in the hearts and the minds of Mormon parents, of Mormon grandparents, of Mormon educators, and of Mormon children, because the church has not and will not denounce or renounce the past statements of its prophets, seers, and revelators.
When it comes to distortions, such as simply staring at someone in a way that can be construed as impure, Jodi takes those who have or sometimes even haven't admitted to having impure thoughts, predominantly men, and levies massive punishments based on the idea that impure thoughts are practically criminal. That apart from taking life, the worst thing you can do in this world is be impure, which almost always resulted in Jodi separating the husbands from the wives and isolating the men to further target them. Now, Jodi's life lessons have a strangely gendered path to retribution that feels at odds with what could be considered successful marriage counseling, right? Like, meaning Connections is only ever really hard on men and never allegedly on the women. And I know what you're thinking, and I thought the same thing too. Without evidence, Trey's words from earlier seem a little questionable. You know, a man blaming a woman for his marriage falling apart. Color me shocked! Except, as we start to understand a bit more of the history of the teachings, is it shocking? And beyond that, Trey isn't the only man who's claimed this about Jodi. Far from it, in fact. If the stories about Jody Hildebrandt are true, then it appears that this is something Jodi has been doing and specializing in and profiting from by the millions of dollars for years. And there is perhaps no bigger whistleblower in the claim against Jody Hildebrandt than a man by the name of Adam Paul Steed. If the name Adam Paul Steed sounds familiar to you at all, there's a good reason for it. When he was a child, he was a member of the LDS Boy Scouts in Idaho, and as an adult, became a nationally known whistleblower against the Boy Scouts of America when he spoke out against one of the worst instigators hiding in plain sight, both within the church and within the Boy Scouts. Now, Adam's courageous act of standing up for himself and what he survived and other victims was so paramount that he and his father were able to inspire a direct change in Idaho law, effectively lengthening the SA statute of limitation laws in Idaho. So huge bravo to Adam and his father, truly. After this, however, Adam's life took another drastic turn when he moved with his wife to Utah to attend college at Brigham Young University. It was here where Adam had a chance encounter with a woman named Jodi Hildebrandt, when a bishop recommended her as a therapist for Adam to work through his own own trauma and the legal proceedings that followed. Now, I want to play a few clips from an interview that I found with him. These are being played under the protection of fair use, and I will be censoring it to make sure that it's not too heavy.
So I started this LifeStar program, and in the program there was couples. We were all couples, and I thought it was like marriage therapy. And right away in the beginning, Jodi was just like, there's a couple of doctrines that she just started just reinforcing all the time. And I want to point out that Jodi moves the real world into an abstract of like doctrines and teachings that she just goes over all the time. And, you know, if somebody hurt somebody, they don't talk about how they hurt and who they hurt and how to make it better. They talk about like an addiction in your head and a problem and self-denial and codependency, and nobody's talking about what actually happened to the person. Nobody's helping make things better. Jodi's not meeting with you and asking you much about your personal issues at all. She was. I later learned using the group sessions to ask us for personal sessions. I heard that was unethical to solicit personal counseling in a group session. I think that's what I remember. But she was just, you know, she had you in these groups of people, and they're laughing, and she's funny, and she's nice, and she's just like her little co-host self, you know, helping people say things they can't say, finishing sentences for people. We like Jodi. I was telling Bishop, hey, this is a great lady. We should have her come to the church and get everybody in this group, you know. She's got a hand on this stuff. She knows how to make everything go away, you know? And then they separate us into the girls-only group and the guys-only group, and then things start to take a really dark turn.
Now, to put it simply, Adam has been struggling with a lifelong addiction to what others have deemed as impure behavior, which I will not be going into detail about. And he began speaking with Jodi in her Connections counseling about the troubles he had. And sure enough, much like Trey Warner and the men Trey talked about, Jodi began to focus on Adam's distortions. According to Adam, Jodi placed Adam in a group of other men, which, remember, is how Jodi would split the therapy sessions up, you know, these group things. And well,
we're sitting there in this group, and I'm in there, and you know, next thing I know, when she's having us talk about how they're acting out, this other guy in the group starts explaining that he's a and he's got victims. I felt horrified. I was in a group with 3 and me. And I didn't feel comfortable at all.
So to put it simply, Adam was placed in a group of men that were intended to take accountability together, discuss their problems together, work things out together. And Adam, a survivor, was placed in a group with a number of men who allegedly confessed to doing similar things that Adam had survived from other people. Can you imagine? Now, as the sessions went on between Jodi and Adam, as well as Adam's wife, things began to shift in a way that got increasingly uncomfortable for Adam. Now, what do I mean? Well,
she took a girl with small issues and taught her how to become a Jodi Jr., to go out and to recruit other women into the program. Jodi hired my ex-wife at that time Jodi was her therapist, and while being her therapist, she hired her to work for her. These emails show my ex-wife having, you know, you can tell in the emails she had some problems. Eventually, Jodi gets her to, you know, they go back and forth in these emails, create a document that completely changed from all the stuff that she shows as the real issue she had with her husband at the time, into something that's completely 100% evolved into something that would help Jodi's cult take over all of these new people, and it would totally destroy me as a person.
So Jodi Hildebrandt was acting as Adam and his wife's therapist, all while using information Adam told her to feed information to Adam's wife. And in the process, she hired Adam's wife to work for her. Sound familiar about Ruby and Kevin? Well, if it doesn't yet, it will. So there are so many conflicts of interest here that you could make a hit TV show about the interests fighting each other to the bitter end. And this was back when things were still okay for Adam and his wife. Now, over time, a number of incredibly dramatic changes began to happen to Adam all at the same time that coincided with the therapy sessions he was receiving with Jodi. Now, it began with fights, starting seemingly every night Jodi and his wife had a session.
In the last months before my wife left with our baby, 3 weeks after our baby was born, and Jodi was upping the confrontational style and control through my wife over my life. And she was coming home and having these huge arguments with me every time she came back from a session with Jodi.
Fights like these started to become a nightly thing for Adam. And fun fact, Not really. Stories like these were eventually weaponized against Adam when his wife decided to leave, taking their kids with her while levying allegations of harm against Adam. On top of his wife leaving, Adam was kicked out of school, banned from church services, and overall saw his life suddenly fall apart with a speed he never could have anticipated. Now, according to Evie magazine, he also said, quote, "At one point I was arrested and in jail for 14 days with 4 felony charges against me. My court fees were about $200,000, almost all in the civil divorce court. I was ordered to take a lie detector test and I had a 500-page rap sheet at the BYU Honor Code office. Yeah, pretty much I was treated like a perpetrator, but the only problem was this isn't how people are in real life and there were no victims. There was no crime or intention for one. I had crossed paths with the wrong people." But what does he mean by crossed paths with the wrong people? Well, friends, those people were actually mostly just a person. Jodi Hildebrandt, who not only fed all of Adam's stories back to his wife, she fed them to Adam's school, the church, and even people affiliated with the Boy Scouts of America that Adam had just blown the whistle on. Can you imagine surviving all of that, going to court over it and winning a settlement only to have your therapist weaponize it all against you yet again? This man has survived more than I can even comprehend. And it took Adam a long time and a few years to get to the bottom of this, but when he did, he was completely shaken by what he had found. And remember how I mentioned back in part 1 that Jodi Hildebrandt had briefly lost her license to practice therapy? This story is why, because of what she did to Adam. And this story, I believe, is indicative of just how deep the rot goes for Jodi Hildebrandt. If my theories are correct that her relationship with Ruby Franke began in therapy sessions, then what happened with Ruby is the darkest possible version of what happened with Adam and his wife so many years before. I believe there is a pattern here because it appears to me that Ruby and Kevin separated after therapy with Jodi, and then Ruby began working for and with Jodi, just like Adam's wife did. Where there is smoke, there's fire, and to me, Jodi Hildebrandt is full of flames. So with all of that in mind, it's worth noting that according to Ruby's own family, it was when Ruby and Kevin entered counseling with Jodi Hildebrandt that things began to ramp up in their own relationship in a troubling way. Ruby and Kevin began living in separate houses, and Ruby began working alongside Jodi at Connections. And by all accounts, the two were actually completely inseparable, with much of the time that Ruby spent away from home being spent with Jodi. Now, I don't know this for sure, but I feel like I can make a pretty educated guess here that Jodi probably did to Kevin Franke what she did to countless husbands over the course of counseling by encouraging him to isolate away from Ruby while lifting Ruby up in the process. Kevin was fully separated from his wife and kids because distortions, and Ruby went further and further down the rabbit hole with Jodi. Now, it's not entirely clear how their relationship progressed or if I'm even fully correct in my assumption, so make of this what you will. But when you think about how Connections has been run, mixed with how Ruby's life has shifted since she met Jodi, one starts to wonder, is this all Jodi's fault? Is Jodi the mastermind? And I haven't even brought up Jodi's own experiences with minors yet because I wanted to make sure that we could honor the story of someone related to Jodi properly. Jodi Hildebrandt, who is an adult, who uses they, them pronouns, is Jodi's nibbling, which is a gender-neutral term for a niece or nephew. Now, recently, Jodi Hildebrandt also came forward with a set of allegations that Jodi herself, how do I put this lightly? I guess we'll stick to the theme, quacked like a duck. And Jodi allegedly did this for over a year. Now, what's disturbing about Jodi's allegations are that what they describe sounds suspiciously familiar to something we heard about at the very start of this story. Now, again, in order to make this digestible for all of you and adhere to the platform's policies, I won't share any of the graphic parts of Jodi's statement. But to summarize those parts, Jodi said that they were subjected to some of the exact same physical treatments and restraints that Ruby's son, who escaped, also faced. Jesse also said the following.
That doesn't excuse Ruby's involvement and her perpetuating these beliefs and these systems, but Ruby didn't come up with this. Ruby obviously supports it, but this is coming from Jody. The things that I experienced while living with Jody.
Jesse goes on to allege being isolated for up to 12 hours a day, once being forced to sleep outside in the snow, and that people in their lives were told that if Jesse ever broke any of the rules Jody enforced on them, they needed to report back to Jody immediately.
People were afraid of me to the point where I was afraid of myself. If someone spoke to me directly, I had to just stare at them and not respond, because she also had systems of people that would report back to her if I broke any of these rules.
Now, police actually questioned Jesse's father, aka Jody's brother, about this at the time, who didn't deny it and claimed that occurred one time and this was a way to show Jesse what it would be like to sleep outside. I mean, yeah, if you want to show someone what it's like to sleep outside, having them sleep outside should do the trick, but hey, Jody's brother, that's not an excuse. Now, I want to take a quick moment to discuss a central theme that has stuck out to me through the entire telling of this story. It's something that has greatly impacted Ruby's family, Adam Steed, Jodi Hildebrandt, and countless others. It's the concept of isolation. Isolation, without a doubt, has been one of the #1 manipulation tactics that people like Jody and Ruby have used against others in order to control their actions. And y'all know with a Swoop doc, I think it's important to quickly discuss the warning signs of these types of tactics so that you are better equipped to protect yourselves if you think that you might be subjected to this type of control. So if we take a look at this power and control wheel put together by Dr. Claire Murphy, we see things like one-sided power games, mind games, inappropriate restrictions, and isolation. Isolation is a pivotal tactic that controlling partners use in order to weaken their victims, prevent them from hearing others' perspectives, and to bring them into line with their own beliefs and requirements. And please remember, this does not have to apply to intimate partners. These tactics can be used by anyone in your life, like an employer, a friend, a pastor, a parent, a sibling, which it's why it's healthy to know how to spot these tactics. So I'm going to modify how I read the next part a little to represent any situation and not just a partner. Isolation is a painful product of unhealthy relationships. People who behave often intentionally separate you from the people that care about them because it offers them greater power and control over the relationship and survivor. This person might have asked or demanded that you not be around or communicate with people they suspect you are attracted to, or even long-term family or friends. They could have ordered you to stop going to their places or doing things you once enjoyed. These expectations have no place in a healthy relationship, and you have the right to be part of a robust support network and community. I'm just going to run down a quick list of some of the main isolation tactics so that you can be aware, and then we will move on from this. So we're starting with dehumanizing you. They'll intentionally look away when you're talking or stare at something else when speaking to you in an effort to make you feel unimportant, keeping you from socializing. Whether you have plans to go out, they come up with a distraction or beg you not to go, invalidating you. They might suggest or say straight out that your needs, boundaries, and desires don't matter to them. Now, other strategies include the following: trying to come between you and your family, using the silent treatment, withholding affection, shutting down communication, actively working to turn others against you, denying support, interrupting, disputing your feelings. No matter what feeling or emotion you express, they might insist you shouldn't feel that way. For example, you shouldn't be angry over that, or what have you got to feel sad about? Please know that if any of this resonates with you, if you have ever felt isolated, alone, or like someone in your life has been trying to keep you away from the people that you trust and the things that you love, please know that you absolutely are valid in how you're feeling. You are not crazy, and your feelings matter, period. If you have someone you trust, please talk to them. And if you don't feel like there's anyone there for you, please know that you will get through this. And there are fantastic resources like thehotline.com that are here to help you free of charge. Please do reach out, and please take care. Now, back to the story.
No, I've never met Ruby. This is the first time I've ever even heard of her. I have gone and watched at least some of her videos. They're very difficult to watch just for my own experience with that form of therapy. So I've never met her, but the things that she is saying and regurgitating are very, very familiar to me. But it's interesting to watch the world respond to her and kind of putting her at the forefront. And I understand that she's the mother of these children, and it makes sense. But the philosophies and the therapeutic modalities that she's using are Jodi's. This is a pattern that Jodi has been engaged with for at least 14 years, but she's definitely taught. I know that she teaches parents to use these types of therapies, as she would call them. So yeah, it's been a really interesting experience watching everyone focus on Ruby, and I understand why. But this is Jodi. These are Jodi's words. These are Jodi's ideas.
Jesse claims that people have been trying to speak out against Jodi for years, but that no one has listened. Jodi Hildebrandt, if Jesse is correct, has been indirectly under the protection of being much more anonymous than the much more public Ruby. This is the most front-facing Jodi has ever been, and the first time that Jodi will hopefully be held fully responsible for the bad things she allegedly has done.
You know, Swoop, you've been following this story, and I'm really curious as to sort of this disintegration of allegedly of Ruby Franke. She separated from her husband. He hasn't seen the kids in 13 months. She met Jodi Hildebrandt. So really, Jodi Hildebrandt might be a catalyst. Is that your observation over the past year?
I think that that's accurate to say, yes. I think that they were both operating in their own worlds, obviously, before they met, and Ruby was vlogging along with her husband. And we've heard the stories now of people like Adam Steed come forward and other victims of Jodi, where she was taking families that she was counseling that were, pushed and, supported by the church. She was taking the men and separating them from the women, the husbands from the wives, and isolating each from each other. So there are longstanding histories of this type of isolation from both of them independently. So I feel like when they met together, it was kind of this perfect, awful, very sinister storm where I believe that Jodi very much instilled her principles and the teachings and this distortion thing that she discusses in Connections, and instilled that very much in Ruby, who was quite open to it because she was already exhibiting for a very long time, number of years on her channel. So when the two of them get together, we see this very horrific story unfold.
On September 6, 2023, Kevin Franke's lawyer, Randy Kester, began speaking out to the public in defense of Kevin Franke, first in an interview with Good Morning America.
He's a good person. He's very gentle. He's a very gentle guy, and no one's ever made any allegations.
The issue with this, Randy, is that the problem with Kevin Franke has never been that he allegedly did anything physically to his family, but more that he not only knew about what Ruby was doing, but enabled it and profited off of it with the 8 Passengers channel. To date, he hasn't owned up to any of this, and I think he probably never will. So let's just remind you of why it's important we don't forget Kevin Franke's role in all of this. Remember what I said about how in 2020, Ruben and Kevin forced their oldest son to sleep on a beanbag for 7 months after banning him from his room?
My bedroom was taken away for 7 months, and then you give it back like a couple weeks ago.
I don't think our viewers know that.
Or when Ruby and Kevin sent that same son off to the Anasazi behavioral camp.
Adults.
We decided it was best to clue you guys in on what's been going on a little bit with Chad, and why Ruby and I are in a hotel room right now in Phoenix, Arizona.
And it would also explain why you haven't seen Chad. Have any of you noticed you have not seen Chad in any of the videos?
I mean, you get the point. Right now, in Kevin's defense, Kevin's been separated from Ruby for over a year as of September 2023, and has claimed through his lawyer that he was not aware of how Ruby's actions towards her kids had escalated in that time. He also claimed he didn't even know where his kids were living. So do with that what you will. And so with that, in the most thorough and robust offense against Kevin, because what the Kevin, him not being aware of what was happening doesn't really matter to me, because number one, where the were you, Kevin? Why weren't you talking to your own children for the last year, Kevin? And number 2, what about all the things Kevin was willingly a part of that was posted to the world to see and that Kevin profited from, just like Ruby? Ruby said that they made millions of dollars off of this. Don't get it twisted. Kevin, allegedly, according to Ruby, was a multi-millionaire. So I'm just like, Kevin, where do you get the whole grain steak and potatoes audacity to play the innocent one here, Kevin? If my theory about Jodi Hildebrandt is true, Kevin, she's the only reason your D-list Lex Luthor looking self isn't in the crosshairs right now. This isn't one of those situations where you realize the errors of your ways, removed yourself from the situation and apologized. No, there's a very good chance that you were viewed as distorted by Jodi Hildebrandt, which that sounds like it would suck, so I'm not, I don't know, maybe you did a double take on another gal, or maybe you watched some inappropriate videos, maybe you just said a bad word that Jodi didn't like, and per her guidance, you moved into a whole ass other house. We know that Kevin, via his attorney, is saying that Ruby told him that in order to stay together, because believe it or not, he was saying he still wants to be with her, he needed to isolate from them for a year, and still, here I am, running my whole ass mouth saying, I don't care, Kevin. This is your family. Those are your kids. It's your job to protect them, no matter what.
The one person that could have done something within his legal right was Kevin. It was Kevin's job to check in on Faith, and he did not. What he was doing all that time when him and Ruby were separated is beyond me.
Kevin, tell me how your kids allegedly not hearing from you, from their dad, for a year is in their best interest. Kevin, if you're such a good person and a very gentle person, Kevin, allegedly, how is that a good thing? According to your lawyer, Kevin, you haven't even seen or checked on your kids this entire time. Kevin, I will keep saying your name, Kevin, so that people remember your name here, Kevin. And even though you want to, quote, do what's best for your kids, get them back, get them under your tutelage and fathership to protect them, I'm not so sure that's a good idea. I'm just not. Again, I hope that he had no involvement here. I hope that is proven to be true. I would hate to think that he did, but here we are. Do we really think that Kevin should get them back after he abandoned them? I don't know, but I do believe that until you own up to the fact that from 2015 to 2020, for almost a decade, Kevin, you weren't just one of the 8 passengers, you were at the damn wheel steering the ship along with Ruby. So I just kind of feel like, own it, Kevin, quack, quack, don't be the duck anymore. I don't know, I can't believe we still got this duck euphemism going on, but you know what, I'm a committed bitch to this thing, okay? On September 8th, 2023, a virtual court appearance was set up for Ruby and Jodi that was delayed by nearly an hour because more than 1,300 people tried logging in at once to watch it. Both of the women appeared in jumpsuits, good colors for them, and didn't enter a plea. And I want you to keep in mind as this case continues to develop the phrasing of the charges, specifically, quote, causing or permitting. I think that's going to play a crucial role in this case, as that indicates to me that prosecutors don't necessarily have to prove that Ruby physically did these things, just at least that she permitted it to happen. Same with Jodi. Now, both women were set to remain in jail without bail until their next hearing, which has changed dates a few times. As of me recording this, it's set for the end of October, but that could change. What's really interesting about this happening is that while speaking for herself, Ruby actually made a rather shocking revelation of her own against her own son, the one who escaped. And again, I won't go into graphic details, but to summarize, Ruby Franke had the whole grain audacity to accuse her son of being inappropriate.
I want to get your reaction, Swoop, to what Ruby said in court today. She said, I parent in a tough way because one of my children, I threw up in my mouth when I heard that. Is this going to fly? She didn't present any evidence, did she? Anything?
I have not seen any evidence that was presented at all. And I think throwing up in the mouth is absolutely the appropriate response there. I was absolutely disgusted and horrified to see her try to flip it like that. You know, we see in cases a tactic called DARVO. It's deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. And I was absolutely just horrified to see that this might be a tactic that she is going to utilize.
I mean, look, there's that 911 call. That is hard evidence, and there's a witness. Will you come back? We're only at the beginning of this story, but I mean, you really are the expert on it. Will you come back and join us again, Swoop?
Absolutely.
No, I'm not going to say one way or another whether any of this is true. I guess there's going to be info that does or doesn't come out. What doesn't really add up for me, though, is why Ruby made these allegations against her own son, and what any of these allegations have to do with, well, anything that she's allegedly done, except now after watching the Mormon Stories podcast episode where Dr. DeLynn explained that a parent's worst nightmare would be to think their child is impure. And when I think of the long-standing history Jodi has of accusing anyone and everyone under the sun of being impure for the sake of isolating and controlling them, it makes a whole lot more sense to me. And the total nonchalance with which Ruby just talks about all of this, I can't. It all goes to show exactly what I've been talking about when it comes to the utter indifference of Ruby Franke, because even if the allegations are true, it's the very calm way she discusses them that really showcases just how banal her brand of evil really is. After being arrested, YouTube completely deleted the 8 Passengers and Connections channels and banned Ruby Franke altogether from the platform. YouTube told people that they, quote, terminated 2 channels linked to Ruby Franke in accordance with our creator responsibility guidelines. So, you know, some progress there. Since then, both Ruby and Jodi have been experiencing vaguely defined medical issues and have had to be hospitalized. Jodi had an alleged life-threatening issue and was sent to a hospital, and Ruby was moved briefly to the medical unit of the jail she was in. But what's really interesting is that a woman named Deborah Monson spoke with Insider about some of the time that she recently spent at the Washington County Sheriff's Office at the same time Ruby and Jodi were there. According to Deborah, she spent about an hour with Jodi in general population and 3 nights with Ruby in the medical ward, and described both as being very tight-lipped, but also noticed that Ruby was distressed over being separated from Jodi. She claimed Ruby said, quote, "Gosh, how long are they going to keep us in here, and why did they separate me and Jodi? I can't understand why they separated me and my friend. Oh my gosh, Ruby, I don't know why you can't understand that." And throughout the rest of her time with Ruby, she claimed that Ruby spoke constantly about her worries about Jodi, wanting to see her and talk to her. And when she discovered Deborah had seen Jodi for an hour, Ruby became very interested in Deborah, asking things like, what did she say? How did she act? Did she say anything at all? Deborah describes this behavior as almost childlike, but also almost smitten. Whatever's going on with Jodi and Ruby definitely transcends a normal professional relationship and even a normal friendship. There's a certain fixation that Ruby allegedly has with Jodi, evident in the statements that Deborah makes, that may seem romantic, but I'd argue they almost might be cult-like. I don't know. Again, all of this is just speculation. Do not take it as fact. Like, what was it about Ruby in particular that Jodi was drawn to? What was it about Jodi that Ruby was drawn to? How did they become business partners? Why did Ruby allegedly neglect her family even more, all to spend more time with Jodi? And most importantly, why does Ruby not seem to care at all about any of this? Now, as of me filming this, there were a few updates that I am not going to deep dive on, but I'll just list them here and potentially cover if we do a part 3. Let me know in the comments if you would like me to do that, and I'll either cover it on my new second channel or make a more extended full-length doc here. A few weeks after their arrest, news outlets obtained the arrest warrants where the police reported that in addition to Ruby's son being detained at the house, the son said that Jody Hildebrandt would dress his using cayenne pepper and honey paste. In instead of them giving medical treatment or going to a doctor, they were trying to treat it at home to keep it a secret. And why would they do that if they didn't know what they were doing was wrong?
So it's a lot to unpack. I want to do it with our panel. We have Stacey Honowitz, Assistant State Attorney and documentary filmmaker and YouTube commentator, Swoop, who's been following this case closely for more than a year. So Swoop, I want to start with you. Are you surprised at what we're learning?
Thank you for having me. And there are parts of me that are surprised at just how much more sinister this seems to get day by day. And then there are also parts of me that just aren't. I've been covering this story for about a year now. And the things that Ruby Franke was willing to put in her vlogs and post to YouTube were very alarming. And I never thought, though, when I consider everything that we've heard now and all the new information that's come out today in the warrants, I never thought that it would go to this severe length, the cayenne pepper. And there were so many warning signs along the way, but it just seems like, I don't know, people missed it. They weren't listening to it. There was not enough being done. And now we're seeing clear evidence.
I know, I agree with you. It just seems so intentional, so premeditated. It's absolutely mind-blowing.
There are also growing questions about Jodi's other business partner, who is the president of the Connections Foundation. So let's also add Pam Botcher to the Suspool. Welcome, Pam. Grab a drink, it's toasty in there. Now, Jodi's nibbling, who we talked about earlier, Jesse, also remembers Pam and had this to say. Pam Botcher, when I was living with Jodi, Pam Botcher was around. She was Jodi's best friend. I didn't realize she was connected in this. I mean, I have very strong feelings towards Pam but she was one of the people that was constantly surveilling. The surveillance of reporting back to Jodi. Jesse said that Pam was always at the house because she was friends with Jodi. So welcome to the Suspool, Pam, and I will continue to be following if she has any potential involvement in this case, and I'm sure we're going to see here if this does go to trial. There has also been a lot of speculation around whether Ruby Franke in particular will ever actually go to trial, or if she'll just blame Jodi for everything, say she wasn't in her right mind, and get off free. Now, firstly, of course, it's innocent until proven guilty always. We do have to keep that in mind. And also, I'm not an attorney, so take this for what you will, but if Ruby was guilty and were to blame Jodi, and if this goes to trial, I find it really hard to think that the prosecution would offer Ruby a deal to turn witness against Jodi in exchange for a lesser or no sentence. I'm willing to bet that the prosecution has way more damning evidence against Jodi and probably Ruby than we could possibly realize. So I don't currently think that they would even need Ruby to get a conviction against Jodi, but of course time will tell, and we really don't know any of the evidence that they have as of right now. Also, I wanted to point out, in the state of Utah, a person cannot use mental condition as a defense. That's what people refer to as like pleading insanity or mental defect. Quote, mental condition shall not be a defense to any charge of criminal conduct. So she won't be able to claim a mental condition, and I don't believe she'd be able to claim that she was brainwashed. Ruby was exhibiting problematic parenting for years before she met Jodi, and I'm sure the prosecution's getting every video clip that they possibly can. And because Ruby has had many videos from her vlogs and the Connections videos, when they both constantly argue the online criticisms that they face about how Ruby was raising her family, that would go to prove that Ruby knew her actions were controversial at best, and that she was of sound mind to come up with excuses to try to justify her actions towards her family that she was broadcasting and profiting and making millions off of. Again, if the prosecution finds evidence to prove that Ruby was causing or permitting these things to happen to her own family, then to me, I kind of feel like it's game over, like no get out of jail free card simply for throwing her alleged accomplice under the bus. But what do y'all think? I would love to know your thoughts and predictions of what you think will happen to Ruby and Jodi. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, please do keep it respectful. Okay, as always, please excuse the brief tone shift as a bit of a palate cleanser, and then I will conclude with my final thoughts. First of all, the billing department, I just need some fresh kitties right now. It has been a while. We haven't seen them. We didn't see them through the Colleen Ballinger series, and so here they are to just purify all of our souls. You can be sure to grab your pieces from the brand new Petty University Valid collection by tapping the link below and in the pinned comment. I have been absolutely blown away by your response to the new collection. I love seeing your selfies And I truly believe that you're going to love these pieces as much as I do. I hope they are a constant reminder of just how powerful, brave, and valid you are. Please keep tagging me in your photos so I can share you on my Instagram stories. Oh my gosh, also, we're almost at 100,000 followers on Instagram. Y'all, we have almost done it. My goal of 100K, we're almost there. Thank you so much. We only have like 2,000 more to go. So if you aren't following me there, please do follow me on Instagram. That's where I post the most often. I respond to a lot of DMs and I hold polls and ask y'all questions for upcoming docs, all of those things. Also, I have officially launched a brand new second channel. I've uploaded my first video to it. The first video is going to be a follow-up to my Colleen Ballinger series where I break down the latest information that has come out after my series aired, as well as digging into the Jojo Siwa interview and answering some of the most common questions that I had while we were investigating that story. I am so stoked again for this new channel. It gives me a way to create entirely new shorter docs on mind-bending topics, as well as posting right when a story breaks, as the format is shorter. I'll also be covering like parts of stories that I don't include in my documentary deep dives on this channel. Sometimes there's just way too much to cover, and I'll also have like extended interviews, all of it, honeys. So join me over there and leave the comment, "Welcome to the Suspool," so I know that you came from this video. Be sure to click the link in the description box or pinned comment, or use the QR code here to download the super fun game Murder by Choice straight to your phone for free to help you progress faster and start solving the mystery right now. You deserve it, honey. Anytime I cover these types of stories where part or all of the root foundation stems from family vloggers, I keep coming back to the same thought. There needs to be better protections in place for the children who are featured, used, and profited from by the content their parents make of them. I never thought when first covering Ruby Franke and 8 Passengers all those months ago in part 1 that this story would escalate to such dark and just unbelievable extremes. In one sense, this is a great step for justice against exploitative family channels, but at what cost? Why did it have to go this far for national news to start to listen to the concerns that so many of us have had for so long? Why did it take so many calls and welfare checks? And why did it take that brave one passenger for someone to finally intervene and save them? And we need to remember, as bad as all of this looks right now, that just like with any case, especially one that involves a public figure, there's still a real chance that Ruby and Jody, or one of them, still get let off and are set free. So I feel it's important that we keep this story alive and keep the pressure on so that the full truth can be discovered once and for all, and that justice is finally served. And at the end of this, no matter how it plays out, the most important thing and what I hope for is that the victims here find healing, safety, and eventually peace. They deserve it. So with that, be good to each other, and we'll see who's next in line to take a dip in the Suspool. Stay ready, stay petty, class dismissed. Swoop!